Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Tom, the Pork Chop Piper, coming to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Now, we tend to tell people that it rains all the time out here, and we do that on purpose just to keep them away. And so far, it's worked, so don't tell anybody, all right? I am joining you here in on Decovia East. Uh, Overlooking beautiful backyardistan. Watching my dog Molly do exactly what Molly does, which is watch the neighbors. Tonight, or this afternoon rather, I'm smoking a Savinelli because it is Friday. Here's to you, matches. And I'm smoking some Northwoods in this. And I've come to decide that this is a pretty good pipe tobacco. It's an English blend. Got a great deck note. Doesn't burn too hot. And, well, I like it. I'm also having a cup of coffee from the Family Motto mug. I know it's kind of hard to read, but it is Latin-ish, and it says Noli Mentula. Which is the unofficial motto for our family out here. I don't think it's important to have an official motto, but I think it's important that I have one. And I'll get to that in a minute. So, let's start right off with a personal sea story. Yes, this is a no-shitter. It was in the early part of the 80s, probably 83, 84-ish. And I had the duty. What the duty is on a submarine, every 2, 3, or 4 days, depending on how well qualified your crew is, you stood a 24-hour duty day, which meant that you had 1 or 2 watches during the day. Maybe you were a topside watch, maybe you were back in the engine room being an engine room supervisor, or maybe you were the below decks watch, taking care of the systems on board forward of the reactor. The watches in port were usually broken up into 4-hour sections so that you could easily break them in and around the meal hours. And duty days on a fast attack submarine were always crazy. And this one was no different. We were in port. In probably a modified availability, which meant most of the crew was on board most of the day, doing work to keep the submarine up, keep it repaired, things like that. I don't know if you can see in the reflection of the window, I've got a hummingbird coming in for a visit. They like it here. But that doesn't happen on a submarine, but this did. So I'd started that day with a topside watch, which was 4 hours, and it was from noon till it was from 8 in the morning till noon. And the rest of my division was busy working. I got done with that watch and had to pick up my duties for my job. I was what they call a fire controlman. I was a guy who takes care of the computers that target the torpedoes and missiles. So, finished my watch, went below decks, had lunch, grabbed my PMS cards and went to work. Well, that day, at the end of the day, I was busy in the docks office, which on a 688 is in the 3-inch launcher space. It's a very small thing, about the size of a closet. And it also served as our corpsman's office. And I was sitting on one of the two typewriters available to the crew to use. And I was using both of these to type up a quarterly maintenance schedule. Now, I am not a high-speed typist at all, and all the letters and the numbers had to go in the respective boxes that they were supposed to. And you always typed that up in ink to show what your intent was, and so that you don't overload maintenance into different areas that you shouldn't. A drawn-out process, fussy, and I knew that I had a below decks watch coming up at midnight, which meant that I would be up and about and working round the clock, and then some, probably 36 hours. So I wasn't looking forward to it. And did I mention I was typing with these? They're about the size of baseball bats, so it was 2 letters, white out, fix it. I think you know the rest of the story. And need to light my lighter. Need to light my pipe again. So, anyways, I'm in the doc's office and I'm typing up this schedule. And lo and behold, 3 bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young sailors stick their head in the doc's office. And the tour guide, because this is back in the days when you could actually tour a submarine if you were active duty. The tour guide said, "This is Petty Officer so-and-so, and he's one of our hot runners. And what are you doing there, Tom?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on a PMS schedule." And the sailors were immediately interested because it was paperwork. Not so much. No, it wasn't sexy. It wasn't fun. I was exhausted. And one of them said something to the effect of, "Well, that's interesting." And I said, "Well, that's all part of the business. If you don't like that business, you might want to save yourself a little time and fail out of sub school now and go to the surface fleet. They'll have you." Thus violating my number 1 rule. And I'll get to that in a minute. The next morning, the Master Chief of the Command, Walt Hughes, I miss you every day, Cub. The Master Chief of the Command drags my happy ass into the commanding officer's stateroom and proceeds to explain to the commanding officer that he was contacted by the Master Chief of Sub School about this sailor who lit into 3 of his students last night. And I knew it was coming. And oh, by the way, I had a mid-watch that night, and I had worked the whole day, and it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as I remember. And the captain lit into me like there was no tomorrow. And it wasn't that I was stupid or careless, I was thoughtless. And he said, "You know, Tom, you're one of my favorite guys on this ship. I've been there since new construction." He says, "You're one of my favorite guys on this ship, and I am deeply disappointed in you." Oh, my eyes started welling up. He knew I was exhausted, so he knew he couldn't push me too far. But he also knew that I knew I made a mistake. So, after they get done chewing my ass, the captain told me that the next day I was going to go up to sub school and give a lecture to that particular class. And I was going to explain to them all the great things about being in the submarine force. And then he told me one thing that'll stick with me the rest of my life. He says, "You always have a choice. In every circumstance, you can be kind and helpful, or you can be a dick. Don't be a dick." I've taught my kids that. I've taught all of the folks that I've mentored in my life that particular thing. And it was so important that I had it inscribed into my favorite coffee cup, which is this one here. It says Noli Mentula. That is a loose Latin translation of "don't be a dick." So remember, and I know I sound like I'm preaching, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like I'm preaching, I'm just giving you a life experience that comes from the heart. That every time you have an opportunity to open your mouth and say something, you have to ask yourself, is it kind, is it helpful, is it true? And above all else, don't be a dick. So the lesson was learned. Cobb Hughes, I know you're there watching over me. And Captain Bowman, you got the point across. It's one I'll never ever forget. That's all for today. I wish you well, and I wish you a great weekend. Pork Chop Piper signing off.